Hey, everybody. It's great that you are here. Thank you so much. And I want to introduce to you my guest today. I am so honored to have Heather Blanton. Heather is a USA Today best-selling independent author, and she's an award-winning screenwriter. And she is author of 30 Christian fiction books. All right, so let's welcome. Hi, Heather. Heather Blanton. Thank you so much for being my guest
For having
today.
me.
Yes, yes. And we were talking a little bit in the green room. And she is just a fascinating and amazing person. So uh, we're going to be learning a little bit more about Heather. Now, if you will, Heather, the question is, what has God given you to do in this season, and how is faith helping you do it?
Wow. Like you said, we were talking in the green room, and I said that is such an appropriate question for this time in my life.
Mm.
I've written 30 books, but over the course of writing those books, I have had those moments, and I guess every writer has them for whatever reason, that you feel like you're banging your head against a wall, you're not making the progress, or you're not getting the accolades, or you're not making the money that you want. And there's also this terrible self-doubt that I've seen most writers have. They call it imposter syndrome. And and three times I have had this crisis, and three times the Lord has given me the exact same scripture, Luke 5:4. And for those who don't know it, that's when Jesus walks up to Peter, who is just coming in from fishing all night, and he says, "Launch back out into the deep." And Peter's kind of disgusted, and he said, "Lord, we've worked all night and we didn't catch anything." But then he thinks about it and he says, "Well, but because you say so, we will go back." Well, three times I'm hearing this launch out into the deep. And I'm like, Lord, by the third time, I'm like, okay, Lord, I don't know what the deep is. So let's help me figure this out. So I spent a lot of time praying about it. And the deep is obviously someplace you're over your head. You're in an experience that you're not familiar with. It's just you and Jesus. It's can be an adventure or it could be a nightmare, but it's not your comfort zone. And the more I prayed about this, the more I heard screenplays. So I had actually written one, A Lady in Defiance, which is from my number one best-selling book, but I just thought it was awful. I knew it wasn't quite right, and so I set it aside and literally let it sit for like 5 years. And then when I got this final nudge to try screenplays again, I pulled it out and I dusted it off. And as I was saying, it was crazy. It was like the Holy Spirit just said, "Here, I'll be your editor." Because I could read through it and I
Wow.
could see stuff that needs to go.
I love the cover.
Oh, isn't it pretty?
Yes, it's
Um,
beautiful.
so we got it shaped up and I entered it in a contest, the International Christian Film Festival, which is the largest Christian film festival in the world. It's in Orlando. And I'll be doggone if that thing didn't make it as an official selection. And so I'm going to go. I could win, but I've never been to a film festival. But I felt like God was opening this door. So I said, okay, well, I'm going in the deep, Lord. Here we go. So I go to this film festival, and I actually got hired by a producer to write a script. There is a woman in Kansas City that helps women who come straight out of prison. She gets them into a nice home. She gives them job training. She helps them stay clean, dry, and sober. And he flew me out there. I met her. We had a great time. We start going back and forth on this script, and the producer died. It's terrible. He had a heart attack out jogging, left a beautiful wife, 2 young daughters. And I was like, well, okay. And at the same time this was going on, I had shopped the script for Lady in Defiance, and I sent it to one of the really big production companies in Hollywood that if I said them, you would know them. They got back with me the same day and wanted to have a meeting. And so my agent and I were sitting in this meeting. These 2 gentlemen are raving about my script, talking about how wonderful it is, how detailed, how the character development, they just, it would be a $5 million budget to start off. Could be a pilot for a TV series. I mean, they were just saying, I didn't say this before. They were raving so much about my script and my writing. I literally at one point wanted to look over my shoulder and wonder if they thought I was somebody else.
Wow.
I
Wow.
literally was like, "Do they think I'm Karen Whittemire or somebody?" But then
Yes.
they said, "Okay, and we'd like to get everything signed in 30 days." My agent's eyes got big, and we were like, "Whoa, okay." So 30
Wow.
days come and go. We don't hear from them. In a few more months, and we finally reach out to them. They had gotten running behind schedule, and they had to go to Oklahoma to start a movie, and the entire cast got COVID. Threw them
Oh
totally off schedule.
my.
One of the partners wound up in the hospital. It was a terrible mess.
Oh my
But by
goodness.
9 months, they still hadn't completed this deal. And at this point, my agent and I were like, "What do you want to do?" And I'm praying about it, and I'm like, "I don't know. Let's give them an ultimatum." And they came back with the paperwork, but the deal wasn't even remotely close to what they had initially said. And I
Wow.
just didn't I just didn't have a good I wasn't comfortable with the massive swings, the change. I didn't know what it meant. So as I said earlier, telling them I didn't want them to produce my movie was like someone saying to Clint Eastwood, "I don't want you to produce my movie," but I really didn't feel like they were supposed to be the ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here I
Yeah.
have this producer who has died. I don't know that project is probably gone. I don't know what to do with my Lady in Defiance script, and I'm like, praying about it. Yet I felt maybe not so much peace, but I did have a sense of expectation that God had a plan. I was trying to
Yeah.
hang on to that.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, my agent calls me and she says, "Well, the bad news is I'm not going to be an agent anymore. But the good news is I'm going to work a partnership with these ladies from Beautifully Flawed Productions, and they're looking for a female-driven Western." And
Oh.
when and when I heard that, my first thought was, you know what? It probably would take a female-driven organization to get this film produced.
There you go. Oh man.
No,
Oh.
Sherry Rigby is the principal at Beautifully Flawed Productions. It's a wonderful award-winning production company. She has written and directed some movies. She's acted in a lot of things. And
Mhm.
she just did the award-winning Divine Influencer, which has won some awards. And I have a lot of confidence that they're going to get that done. So that door is open. I have walked through it, but now I'm still waiting for the rest of these doors to open.
Wow.
But at the same, but then as this is going on, the Lord gives me another script ahead. But then all of a sudden, this one just boom right there, and I was like, "Oh, I like that." And I told Janet that I've never had the Lord give me such a complete story. But I mean, it was the whole thing.
Yep.
I can't get over it. And I have entered it in 8 contests, and it has placed in 8. If not, it's actually won some. But perhaps even bigger than that was I also shopped it. And the first producer I sent it to said, "I want to take this to Sony." And he was about to get it to his contact at Sony when the contact said, "I'm sorry, I'm moving to a different department." I'm like, "Ugh, okay."
Oh.
So
So
again,
many
I'm like, "Okay,
doors
God,
closing, but that's
that's
okay.
weird." It's like they open and then they close. And
Yep.
and I, like I said earlier, I'm like Kung Fu Panda. I just kind of keep tripping forward. So,
And is this
well,
Unbridled Hearts? Is that what you're
this is
talking about now?
Unbridled Hearts. Yeah, and
Yes, look at this.
there it is.
Oh,
Look at all those. I can't believe
yes, and all the
that.
laurels, all the awards. Oh my goodness.
And that is
That's
so God,
amazing.
because I mean that's the third script I've ever
God.
written.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And um so that producer, he said, "Well, let me see what happens with it. I'm going to shop it around." And his name is Martin Michael, and he got it to his contact at Netflix South Africa. And
Ooh.
we are on our 3rd meeting with Netflix South Africa. I can't get over that. South Africa.
Oh,
And we just survived. They did an elimination round where they cut some projects they weren't sure they wanted to produce, and we made the cut. We're still on the table. So I'm hopeful. I told Janet I'd be a little tiny bit disappointed if it got produced in South Africa, because the story is actually about a wild horse refuge in South Dakota. But, if it has to go to South Africa, it can go to South Africa. It's a good story.
absolutely.
I didn't mention this before, but Unbridled Hearts It is a romance, but it's really also the story of, it's almost like a parable,
Mhm.
because the heroine in this story was betrayed on her wedding day. And so she has let that bitterness, that
Mm,
mistrust, that anger rule her life for 10 years.
mm, my goodness.
And it's about, she has to come home and she has to face the way that has paralyzed her and caused her to shut out the people who really do love her.
Right, right. Oh,
So
that's a beautiful story.
I think that's what appeals to people when they read it, because it's very
Mhm.
redeeming, you know? She almost has to die to wake up to it, but it's true.
Oh,
People, you know, I've seen it. That's where it came from. I've seen people that just get so hung up on not forgiving someone that they don't see the harm that it's done to themselves,
right,
and that's really sad.
right, right. And that is such a great message about forgiveness because, you know, if we can't forgive, we're not going to be able to be set free to
That's
do
right.
what God has called us to do in our season. So that
You
is
choose to
a
do what's right.
very important message. Absolutely. Well, what is next, Heather?
Um,
That you
well,
don't, not that you don't have enough on your plate that you're.
well, because of some contacts I've made at the film festivals, I was mentioning this, that I'm writing a spec script for INSP based on my book, Grace Be a Lady.
Oh,
Um, the original story is very much a romance, and it's about a young woman that her husband banishes her from their home because he thinks she's fooling around on him, and she is not, but he doesn't care. He fools around on her. And he banishes her to this really small town that's in the middle of a range war, and she doesn't want to become a prostitute, so she cuts her hair and pretends to be a boy.
oh,
And when I was explaining this pitch to Tommy Blaze, the guy who was contacting me for INSP, he said, "That sounds like a rom-com." And I said, "Well, that's only because you don't know your Western history. There are a lot of women who went west and pretended to be boys so that they could live a peaceful life and not become prostitutes."
wow.
And one of the most famous ones is a lady named Charlie Parkhurst, who she drove a stagecoach for years and years and years.
Wow. Wow,
So
that's fascinating. That's so
it's
interesting.
different.
Oh my. Well, now, uh, how long did you have to study, I guess, to, because you usually write the historical westerns, romances. So
Mhm.
how long did you have to study the history?
Well, I grew up watching westerns. Not that they're historically accurate, but they definitely give you the feel for the time. I was
Sure.
a huge Bonanza fan. I still love Bonanza,
Oh,
and
me too.
my daddy was probably the closest thing I've ever met in real life to John Wayne. I mean, you could throw a quarter up in the air and he could quick draw and pop it. And he taught me to shoot when I was 5, so I'm very comfortable around firearms, and I think that's where I got my love of history from. So I have read letters and diaries and journals. I know things about the West that would probably curl your hair. And so, I don't generally have to research too much until I get to something very specific. Like, for example, in Grace Be a Lady, there's a pivotal moment when she gets to make a phone call back to Chicago so that she can try to get her 5-year-old son on the phone. And I got this idea from doing research on Cheyenne, Wyoming, and they actually had a phone system set up that you could call. You couldn't call everywhere. You couldn't call Sheridan or Casper, but you could call from Cheyenne to Chicago. And I think it
Wow.
probably has to do with the railroads. And eventually all of that, of course, expanded. But,
Ooh,
you know, yeah. So stuff like that, I
yeah,
saved those nuggets. I saved those
yeah,
nuggets of
yeah.
information.
And too, if you're writing historical westerns, you need to know all of the history and everything. Oh, that is that's fascinating.
That doesn't mean I
You,
don't make mistakes, especially on
oh,
clothing. Clothing is hard to nail down, but
yeah,
and
yeah,
eventually there's
yeah.
always somebody that can catch you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, Heather, that you are an amazing person, and
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you.
so yes, I'm so glad that you could join me today, and just a wonderful story there, wonderful stories that you have been writing, and so we want to let people know where to connect with you or contact you. There's Heather's Hootenannies. She has a Facebook group. I'm going to check that out myself. And then she is on Instagram, Book Hub, Amazon, and X, which used to be Twitter. All right.
Oh, you
Thank
know what? I would like to mention one thing.
Yeah.
My website is authorheatherblanton.com. And if people go there, they can sign up for my newsletter and they'll get a free book. But the thing that I want to mention about my newsletter is God has really blessed me with some great readers. I think they're very like-minded, let's say. We're all pretty hardcore believers. And my open rate is over 40%, which the industry average for a newsletter is 20-something%. So I'm doing really well there. And I answer every single email that I get. And I do sometimes 2 contests a week. I give away books and audiobook coupons and stuff. And I spend a lot of time interacting with people through email. I know that people prefer Facebook because it's more instantaneous, but I'm not sure how much I trust Facebook. So if I want to be able to talk to my readers, we can do it through email.
All right. That's great. And
I will take that away from me.
I will add your email. I'm sorry, your website. I'll add your website in the comment section along with the other links that you gave me. That's great. Thank you, Heather. Appreciate it so much.
I enjoyed talking to you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you all for watching. And I do want to thank the viewers on Abundant TV as well. Have faith and look up, friends, where our help comes from. Bye. God bless.
Bye-bye.